I think this is without a doubt the best Momoi Jump event story in Project SEKAI Global, and to help me defend myself from Haruka, Minori and Airi fans, I'd like to over-explain not only this event's story, but the loaded symbolism in the card art, the strength of characterization in the event's songs, lyrics and 3D MV, and what the deal is with this character who was finally given a face and voice in this story. And then I can clue you in on why she is my favourite character in all of Project SEKAI, by overanalyzing the third key event story focused on Hinomori Shizuku at the end of the Unravelled Thread. Obviously, spoilers for this event story and those before it, but also a couple of loose references to a card art from Shizuku3, which I haven't read yet. The story begins at the end of the previous event, Beyond the Dream of That Day, where Momoi Jump are to make a TV appearance with another idol group hosting them. However, the event ends with the cliffhanger that the other idol MCs can no longer make it, but they have an able replacement in the form of the idol group Cheerful Days. If you've forgotten or just didn't know, Cheerful Days is the name of the idol group Shizuku used to be in during the earliest parts of the main story. And she was even given the spot as the leader until she chose to quit. While I didn't give any kind of summary in the previous video about Mizu5 and instead just assumed everyone watching knew or roughly knew the story or didn't care, this is an older story of a less popular group and, you know, isn't Mizu5, so I think a little more of a story summary could help here. But, as always, I will urge you to read the story yourself. Think about it. You get cool rewards now. Don't you want to have a cool 100% story completion stat too? Or, you know, just read something cool? Anyway, here's a quick recap. Shizuku's phone's dead. Or rather, she realizes later that the charging cable wasn't fully plugged in. As a result, though everyone's really kind to her when she meets them on the rooftop, she has no idea why. When she gets told that they received an email saying that MCs will be replaced by Cheerful Days, she seems happy? Though the others are satisfied, Airi is not, pulling Shizuku to one side, asking her how she really feels. Though she admits some feeling of unease, Shizuku states that she sees this as a good opportunity, and she doesn't want to make Momoi Jump worry for her every time Cheerful Days comes up. Airi recognizes Shizuku's resolve and respects it. Later, they meet with the IHAS producers to get the details on the TV segment they're going on, which apparently is only 5 minutes long? Minori's freaking out, and Shizuku takes a moment to calm her nerves effectively, even though Shizuku's the one who should be really freaking out, especially when the producer tells them that their MCs, Cheerful Days, are just upstairs and he'd like them to meet. Once they meet, Arisa makes her intentions known immediately. Shizuku is shaky but remains headstrong. Arisa says that she'll be giving it her all, which she means a bit differently to how Shizuku might be seeing her at this time. Though, there are some worries about Shizuku's history with Cheerful Days, which we see in a 2-episode flashback of Shizuku starting off in Cheerful Days along with Arisa, and how Shizuku's fake, perfect persona is crafted by the Cheerful Days staff and upheld by the other members, how Shizuku becomes the lead because of the persona's success, and how this leads to Shizuku's downfall through the frustrated team members, jealousy, and bullying, which would ultimately lead her to quit Cheerful Days, as seen in the main story. Afterwards, they make their TV appearance, and everyone follows the script until Shizuku is introduced. Arisa interjects here really harshly. Despite Airi and Haruka trying to ad-lib them back onto the script, Arisa is merciless in bombarding Shizuku with brutal questions and truths, to which Shizuku simply smiles, and as she says she would do, takes the opportunity to address the audience and Cheerful Days both, taking the blame upon herself for creating the persona instead of the Cheerful Days staff, and simultaneously apologizing to and thanking the audience and Arisa for these opportunities. She also makes the claim that both her current self and her old Cheerful Days self are one and the same. And though she takes a bullet for Cheerful Days, everything she says is true, and the authenticity of it shocks Arisa, making her feel guilty as she backpedals and promises to go back on script. Finally, Arisa approaches them after the show, and though Airi and Haruka are ready to throw hands, Shizuku is absolutely thrilled by what Arisa has to say, and respects and admires her massively, even after all of that. It is an event story that tests her evolution from Cheerful Days Shizuku to the current Momoi Jump Shizuku, an evolution that occurred in Color of Myself. If Shizuku 1 is about accepting her current true self, then actually, Shizuku 3 is about accepting her old Cheerful Days self and bringing them both together in a ritual to accept all of her flaws, and to live on without guilt, regret, and shame, allowing her to face the future with confidence rather than be buried in the sorrows of the past. And to that end, these themes are reflected all throughout this event. Not stopping at the event story being told, we also have the art of the cards. As with most events, there's actually quite a lot to unpack with the card arts from the event. First off, the Untrained Shizuku is a brilliant meme format. Use it in a friend's video here actually. I'm sure you could think of many things to use it with. Despite the way this meme format would be used, Airi here is glaring at Arisa, not at Shizuku, unlike the usual meme. Though Shizuku is still ignoring Airi and looking at Arisa with admiration. More on that later. But far more importantly, we have the trained card arts. They all feature this fantastical, overgrown setting, vibrantly filled with plants, and, more significantly, flowers. Now, I'm no florist or botanist or expert of any sort, so if anyone watching is a bit of a flower enjoyer, I'd love it if you could also have some input in the comments. But until then, I will try my best. Let's start with Haruka's card. This card is actually down at water level, unlike the others, letting you see just how tall the plants are in the background. These water lilies seen in the cards have Buddhist symbolisms of rebirth, since they close at night and open in the morning, and also of enlightenment, because they can rise out of mud. This doesn't seem like a particularly muddy card, but still both themes apply. But perhaps this makes more sense. Shizuku reaches a form of enlightenment by the end of her first event story, Color of Myself, where she realizes she's fully able to be herself, overcoming her fears and part of her imposter syndrome. Wait, what's that about? We'll definitely come back to that, don't you worry. Those enlightenments get tested heavily in this event story at the end of Unravelled Threads, and we'll see a new kind of rebirth in this very event story. The rebirth symbolism also represents Perfect Shizuku being reborn in MMJ as one more authentic to herself. Though, plants aside, there are also two frogs in Haruka's art. Because this is overanalyzing, frogs symbolize transformation and rebirth due to how they can grow from tadpoles. But given the princess-style dress, could be related to the Frog Prince, where in the original fairy tale, a princess promises to help a frog that helped her, but when it came time to actually help the frog, she rejected it and only did so reluctantly when her father told her not to go back on a promise to the one who had helped her. When the frog enters her room, she throws the frog at the wall with all of her might, only for the frog to fall from the wall not as a frog, but a beautiful, handsome prince. So, who is the frog and who is the princess? Direct comparisons are hard to draw here because the story is hardly analogous to the fairy tale, but it could be seen as Shizuku being the frog, where Arisa shows her disgust during the main story and the flashbacks of this event story, only to realize by chapter 7 that the real, authentic Hinomori Shizuku was like the handsome prince. Wait, hang on a minute. An alternative interpretation would be to flip it around, where the initially repulsive Arisa, who we're introduced to as little more than Shizuku's antagonist, actually has far more to her character than one might think. The don't judge a book by its cover moral might seem weird applied to Shizuku since she is told to be notoriously beautiful, but this very appearance is what causes members of Cheerful Days and even Airi in a moment of weakness to look down on her. Both parties thinking that Shizuku can get everything that she wants just by nature of her looks. And since there are two frogs in Haruka's card art, with how they symbolize transformation and rebirth from how they grow from tadpoles, this can show two characters in the event story having a rebirth or transformation. One of them is most definitely Shizuku, and that is just not to be argued, so who is the other? One can argue it's Minori because she is growing in experience and evolving through her very first TV appearance. But much more likely, I think, is Arisa, who, despite being the antagonist of this story, clearly has a moment of self-reflection when she comes face to face with the authenticity of Hinomori Shizuku. But these interpretations of rebirth and transformation are actually aided by Haruka's dress. The asymmetric black and white partition shows two sides of Shizuku, both her Cheerful Days persona and the Shizuku currently with more jump. The white colouring filling more of the top and the black taking more of the skirt creates a yin and yang kind of theme, the idea of two opposite forces that intertwine, with both, though mostly opposite, still needing the other and having aspects of one another like light and shadow. This represents what Shizuku has to say in episode 7, that the old her and the new her are one and the same, but could be equally related to the opposite ends that Shizuku and Arisa represent. The dress also has these bows that kind of look like butterfly wings, especially with how they're drawn in this perspective. Wings that we'll also see in Shizuku's trained card art. Looking at the blue flowers Shizuku is reaching for, at first I thought they were forget-me-nots, then realised the middle wasn't yellow, and next thought they were Falscilia flowers, or dense Falscilias, and then arrived at Eastern Blue Star flowers. Funnily enough, all three of these have valid symbolisms that could apply to the event story, so apparently I can just make anything up and hope no one asks any questions. Despite that, with the help of, epicgardening.com, I found Tweedia, which I think looks closest and the symbolism matches. Blue Tweedia symbolize peace, calm and tranquility, as well as wishes granted and hopeful aspirations. Shizuku is reaching her hand out to these flowers, so it's like her extending her hand towards her aspirations, those being to be herself without shame or guilt, which she absolutely does and focuses on doing during this entire event story. The flower is also associated with stability and calmness, which Shizuku does also reach for as she spends most of the event story trying to hold herself together, but mostly for the sake of others, which we'll get to in a bit. The flowers in the background, and the one Shizuku's decided to live in, I believe to be tulips, specifically wild tulips, symbolizing affection, caring, and good wishes. While that just kind of sounds like Shizuku, it could also mean Shizuku's feelings towards not only MMJ, like when she focuses on calming Minori down in the early episodes of the event, but also during her confrontations with Arisa. Shizuku shows nothing but good wishes for Arisa, no matter what she says in the event. These silvery looking ones could be any number of 4-petal white flowers, but I found these 3 that I think match up well in terms of looks and symbolism. First off, we have the mock orange flower, also known as Philadelphus coronarius. In Victorian flower language, the mock orange flower represented counterfeit or false beauty, which is exactly what Cheerful Days would have thought Shizuku was and what they wanted her to be. It's also probably exactly what Shizuku felt about herself during and after her time with the persona, at very least until Color of Myself. In the card art, Shizuku is reaching for the blue Tweedia instead of the mock oranges, showing that she's moving past that fakeness and choosing her aspirations towards authenticity. However, the modern associations of the mock orange with sweet memories and nostalgic charm work just as well. In fact, they work in tandem with the previous Victorian meanings. Shizuku brings her Cheerful Days with her real self to create that unified Momoi jump self, choosing to never forget Cheerful Days rather than burying away the memories. I think this is also evident by just how many references Shizuku has towards Cheerful Days and Arisa throughout the game, this event's music video, these cards, and so on. It also kind of looks like flowering dogwood, which has a whole list of symbolisms that would apply, and though it doesn't look quite as much alike, it still fits the bill as a 4-petaled white flower. This flower in the card is weirdly silver and metallic anyway, so it's marred slightly by fantasy. And you know what? I'm just gonna read these straight off the website because I can't make up how stupidly well these symbolisms fit Shizuku and her story here. Once again, we get rebirth and resurrection, particularly with references to Jesus Christ. So like, Shizuku is our savior, but I think we knew that already. Pity and regret over a specific decision or situation beyond your control. Literally everything in Shizuku's Cheerful Days time felt out of her control, from her application, audition, being chosen as a lead, and when everyone began to turn on her. But since we're talking about specifics, the one that would stick out would definitely be the Cheerful Days staff choosing her as the leader. Durability and reliability, and strength and resilience. These we see especially during this event, leading up to and during the iHas TV broadcast. Purity, especially in a religious or spiritual sense. I think this can be interpreted as purity in the form of authenticity and honesty, with how much truth she speaks during the iHas show. And finally, a sign of affection for someone who may not reciprocate it. It feels like I've written this one in myself because it just fits the event far too well. Of course, with regards to Shizuku and Arisa. Thank you, lovingly.com. And thirdly, we have the white Gora, which, yeah, doesn't quite look the part, but in my opinion, when looking at the flowers in the cards and album art, maybe it's a trick of the perspective, perhaps intended this way, but they do kind of resemble butterflies. And there is a 4-petaled white flower that resembles butterflies to the point of being named after them in the whirling butterfly, also known as a white Gora, which represent supreme beauty. But they're also known as bee blossoms, down to their attractiveness to bees. Perhaps suggesting Shizuku does tend to attract rather stingy characters like Airi. Yay! And even Arisa.
Yeah!
Moving on to the symbolism, white Gora show strong resilience in harsh conditions, adding to the water lily meanings from Haruka's card. Not only for Shizuku among Cheerful Days, both back in the main story and in this event story in episodes 6 and 7, but also Shizuku's strong resilience in maintaining her composure better even than Airi and Haruka in episodes 6 to 8, where the latter kinda wanna throw hands with Arisa. Butterflies themselves also represent that constant theme of transformation and rebirth, again with Shizuku's rebirth in Momoi Jump, and also the unification of her old and new selves by the end of this event story. If I were overanalyzing, I could talk about Taoism and butterflies. Because this is overanalyzing, Zhuangzhou, I'm sorry for the pronunciation, in 300 BC, wrote Dreams of Being a Butterfly, which reads as follows. Once, Zhuangzhou dreamed he was a butterfly flitting and fluttering about, happy with himself and doing as he pleased. He didn't know that he was Zhuangzhou. Suddenly, he woke up and there he was, solid and unmistakable Zhuangzhou. But he didn't know if he was Zhuangzhou who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming that he was Zhuangzhou. Shizuku's identity, while mostly concluded in this event story, is one of her main struggles and dramatic questions in her character arc. Her not knowing which Shizuku she wants to be parallels with Zhuangzhou's story. It's not as simple as Cheerful Days Shizuku being fake and MMJ Shizuku being real, as she'll say herself in this event story. As while maintaining the image of perfect Shizuku, she's actively trying to work on being perfect Shizuku through her extra practice and work. She's unsure what she is destined to be until the end of Color of Myself, and unsure whether she is still just normal Hinomori Shizuku dreaming of being an idol, or an idol who is Hinomori Shizuku. Also, if you doubt that this is a white Gora or butterfly symbolism at all, then explain this card name. And, you know, if you haven't read the side story for it, guess who's in it? Checkmate. Next, we have Minori's card, and after several hours of searching, I figured out that these are probably magnolia flowers. Thank you, gardenersworld.com. Magnolias have been around for an extremely long time and so symbolize themes like longevity and everlasting connections. In Chinese culture, magnolias symbolize purity and nobility, as well as a connection to healing powers through Chinese medicine. In Japanese culture, they represent a love for nature, nobility, dignity, and perseverance. Dignity is a thing that Arisa tries to disgrace by attacking Shizuku in the live broadcast, but, as with the perseverance symbolism, Shizuku is able to stay on course to her main goal, and show strength no matter what Cheerful Days throws at her. Perseverance is also a strong trait of Minori, given her countless auditions and unwavering will at training to be an idol. So it's natural that these flowers appear in Minori's card. I also tried to look into the meaning of her looking through the leaf. If it's a magnolia leaf, it symbolizes eternal life and renewal, and there's holes in the leaf. Meaning, I don't know, Minori was hungry, I guess. Or she's Voldemort. Before we move on to Airi's card, I have to admit to you I may have gone completely insane. This is because one particular flower seems to be very important and present around this story, event, and Cheerful Days, yet somehow seems different in its every appearance. It's this thing. This colourless flower on Shizuku and Arisa's idol outfits, I absolutely, for the life of me, could not figure out what it is. It didn't help that Shizuku has another one in her hair with a different number of petals. I was ready to just give up and vaguely call them lotuses or magnolias, till I noticed the flower brooch in everyone's hair. An 8-petaled red flower. Trying to find that directly was a struggle, but on the first day of writing this video, I thought Airi's flowers were kalanchos, and I didn't get more specific than that. Well, let me tell you, I've tried to be a bit more specific since. Single kalanchos can typically have 4 petals, but more modern cultivations like the Flaming Katie or the Kalancho Blossfell Diana, or more broadly, the Kalandiva Kalancho, can be double flowered with anywhere between 8 and up to 32 petals. Now, I've struggled to find the Kalandiva Kalancho with exactly 8 red petals, but I'm happy to believe in myths at this point. Therefore, the flowers in Airi and everyone else's hairpins are likely 8-petal Kalandiva Kalanchos. These flowers in the background of Airi's card are also kalanchos, but they are still buds yet to bloom. And as you can see, she's pushing aside these leaves like she's searching for something, and we can see that she's found the blooming red 4-petal kalanchos. Now, there are a lot of different kinds of kalancho, but the Blossfell Diana seems most common, and that kind of variance they can have is one of the only things giving me confidence in this identification right now. While kalanchos have their own symbolisms to look into, I think it's more important that these hairpins, and possibly these flowers Airi was searching for, are the same for the story, because they would also be the same flower on the Cheerful Days uniforms and Shizuku's hairpin. As what the kalanchos symbolize, they represent persistence, eternal love, wealth, and prosperity. Persistence definitely shows through Shizuku's resilience in the event story, but also her unwavering motive to spread hope to people which she always has had, even in Cheerful Days. In a similar way, the eternal love symbolism shows, just like the flowering dogwood, through Shizuku's admiration of Arisa despite everything, but it can also show her fondness of Airi since it was her words that gave Shizuku direction and meaning as an idol in the first place. And the reverse can definitely be true as well, as Airi has similar admiration for Shizuku. All of the characters having this kalancho brooch shows not only their persistence, resilience, and affection for one another with their strong bonds as Momoi Jump, but also the wealth and prosperity can represent success for Momoi Jump. Doubtlessly foreshadowing their future successes, but more relevant to now, how this anxiety-inducing clash with Cheerful Days is going to be completely fine and result in an absolute win for Momoi Jump and Shizuku. We'll be seeing this flower again later. With the idea that Airi is searching for a blooming kalancho amidst the buds can mean that she's searching for those meanings, like prosperity and resilience, but more likely, the kalancho is a symbol of Cheerful Days and Shizuku. So long as these flowers are actually kalancho Blossfell Dianas, and I'm not currently being actually by the pinned comment of this video, then the flowers symbolize specifically Cheerful Days Shizuku. By searching for her, we see Airi ignoring all of these buds, which represent the Shizuku who is still hiding her real self and afraid. But the blooming kalanchos show the Shizuku that has accepted her past self for all the good she had intended, and in finding it, both the Cheerful Days Shizuku and the Momoi Jump Shizuku can be one and the same. If this is the flower representing Cheerful Days, then these symbolisms can also apply to them. This resilience and prosperity equally applies, as Cheerful Days were able to survive with the sudden departure of their leader, Shizuku, and still found success, such as actually hosting this entire IHAS episode, not just the 5-minute segment with Momoi Jump. Then, there's another Cheerful Days flower we're missing right now. You see, you remember how I said these blue flowers were forget-me-nots? I was really annoyed when I realised they probably aren't and were instead tweedier, and that's because my notes on forget-me-not symbolisms were basically Shizuku3 as an event story. Well, imagine my happiness when we looked at another flower in Cheerful Days, the 5-petal hairpin worn by Arisa. I imagine this to be a few different white flowers like wild heliotropes, pop star white balloon flowers, or white jasmine flowers, but couldn't help but think they were shaped like those blue forget-me-nots. Though, while kalanchos can be white, I figured the flower brooches in their Cheerful Days uniform were white or silver by design. So why not have a colourless, silvery forget-me-not? Though, white forget-me-nots also exist. At this point, let's look back at the trained cards. Not only do we see water droplet earrings on the characters, naturally representing Shizuku as that's literally what her name means, but we also see those 5-petal flowers on the earrings or in their hair, the exact same that are being worn by Arisa. On the surface level, this shows a conjoined admiration for Arisa and Cheerful Days, but also Shizuku, especially with Airi's earrings putting them together. It shows that they're willing to wear it to remember her and represents Shizuku not running from the past any longer. As for the flower itself, it represents remembrance, to treasure memories with those dear to you, and, if you'll allow me to directly quote again, lovers adorned themselves with these blooms as a token of everlasting affection, ensuring their bond remained strong when separated. It may be potentially one-sided, or maybe not, but this can represent Shizuku and Arisa again, or even Shizuku's past and present selves. Specifically, white forget-me-nots represent serenity and grace, as well as acts of charity or selfless care for those in need. Shizuku's selflessness is always on display, but especially in this event. The reason I'm attributing these meanings to Shizuku in Momoi Jump despite being Arisa's hairpin is because until this event, Arisa didn't have a character design. Both these cards with the flower and Arisa's Live 2D would have been released at the same time. So essentially, Arisa is just another design for this event specifically. But if we were to attribute the meanings to Arisa, then it could be a kind of irony in saying that she's eternally faithful to Shizuku as a friend and leader, since her patience ran out and she made no attempt to defend her. And of course, she'd attempt to bring her down in the IHAS segment. The other way to interpret that is that this is not the end of the story. This could be a foreshadowing of Arisa's feelings about Shizuku, as if she's always felt positively about her, but she's just a little tsundere. Remind you of anyone? And of course, we see a little bit of that toward the end of this event. And Mako is there too, holding a kalancho. Yeah. Minori's also got one in her earring, which, if you want to overanalyze it, could be like holding it close to her ear as she's listening intently to any lessons she can get from the IHAS segment, Shizuku, and Cheerful Days. Pink and red roses decorate Airi's skirt, symbolizing admiration and gratitude and deep affection and romance. Of course, this can once again show Shizuku's admiration of Arisa, but also Airi's admiration of Shizuku. See? Good meme format. Moving on from card art, we have the lyrics of the song, Watashi wa watashi tachi wa, or as it's known in game, I am, we are. Hold on. They missed a whole 2 words here. Did they not realise the significance of the hesitation in the title and correcting herself from saying I am to we are, showing a sense of unity between Shizuku and the rest of Momoi Jump, but also potentially a connection between her and Arisa, and even alternatively leaving I am in there to show the independent nature of Shizuku reflected in the lyrics of this very song, and in the name of her 4-star card, graduation to independence, which they were totally fine putting there, but missed the significant detail in the official English name. Are they stupid? Moving on. The music video itself starts with this teardrop shaped jewel that we see Shizuku within, surrounded by night sky and precipitation like a snow globe. Shizuku's mime-like motions give the impression that she's trapped within it. She also kind of draws an X shape with her hands alongside the line, so much so that I get scared of not amounting to anything. Which is the second part of a sentence when translated to English due to the way Japanese grammar works. That kind of dance move that punctuates the lyrics with the X meaning nothing is pretty common across the whole MV and most MVs. Like when later Shizuku sings that she has everything she wants to protect and points to all of the MMJ members. However, as the camera enters the jewel, snow globe, teardrop thing, we see inside a very fantastical, royal looking room, adding to that princess motif from the outfits and the whole frog thing in Haruka's card. Please don't yeet the frog. So it's more like we're entering Shizuku's world or mind palace in this Shizuku-shaped jewel as the song explores her inner thoughts and turmoil. That trapped mime part of the dance shows the Color of Myself storyline, with Shizuku being trapped by the persona she had been made to use in Cheerful Days. Now, brace yourself, because this next bit went harder than I ever thought it would. As Airi begins her line, Shizuku and Airi create the illusion of reaching for each other's hands. But notice how Shizuku doesn't look at Airi, and they end up crossing each other, leaving Shizuku on her own with a downcast gaze. Airi is initially looking at Shizuku, then has this kind of half glance of regret at her. This represents Shizuku reaching for Airi's help and comfort during the events of the main story, where Airi instead lashes out at her, the events that ultimately triggered Shizuku to quit Cheerful Days and being an idol overall, and Minori then enters with her first line of never showing tears ever again, with this kind of shake of the arms like wiping tears on their sleeves, especially Shizuku, who holds her arms higher than everyone else. Haruka then enters, asking if her heart has gone drier than yesterday. This all symbolizes crying to the point Shizuku can't do it anymore, so quite literally, she can't cry anymore. Or you can see it as, and such is her selflessness, that she doesn't want to trouble anyone with her tears, playing so strongly into her character and this event story. Also notice how Haruka and Minori are doing different dance moves and poses compared to Airi and Shizuku, who are still in that crying pose. Also, Len's there too. To be fair, I always see the virtual singers as the reflections of the main characters anyway, super obvious with Mafuyu and Nightcord. Goodbye to my mass self-over-analysis soon. This might be a stretch, but the word kawaita in the lyrics, meaning dry, is split into two with the rhythm of the song. During the kawa, all of the characters hide their faces with their hands. If you interpret this lone kawa to mean river, then it's like they're hiding a river of tears behind their hands, since after all, Shizuku has said she won't show tears ever again, ever again. With that, we move forward to a repeated convention in the lyrics that I'd like to draw attention to. Quite literally, the repeated convention is repetition. I'll never show my tears ever again, ever again. There's nothing I'm scared of, I'll never feel afraid. There's nothing I'm scared of, I'll never feel afraid. Both of these lines stay the same when they're repeated in the next verse and chorus, and so repeat again. Particularly with the latter lines in the chorus, the repetition is like, rather than Shizuku speaking to the audience, or anyone in particular, it's more like she's talking to herself, repeating it to reassure herself that this is the truth, and she doesn't have to be afraid anymore. This can be taken as a kind of self-pep talk to calm herself down before approaching Cheerful Days again, or it can be seen as her talking to her old self, who was so deathly afraid of being seen as imperfect, both by the wider audiences and by her fellow idols. More on the specifics of that as we delve into the event story. During these lines, the characters turn to dark silhouettes, highlighting the scenery and representing shadows. Remember the yin-yang theming of the characters' clothes? This is that. The shadow figures here, still in this fantastical room, represent that other self within Shizuku, in this case, the Cheerful Days Shizuku. This is actually supported by the World Link 2 Shizuku cut-in, coming back to that in a minute. For now, in the default MV, if the dark silhouettes represent old or perfect Shizuku, then the background colours that now stand out are also playing a part. Purple symbolises royalty, yes, playing into that Frog Prince theme again, but is also linked with magic, especially considering the Shizuku3 event Cast a Spell on You, prominently featuring a purple dress that Shizuku wore, because purple is THE colour of Cheerful Days. Highlighting that this teardrop snow globe world Shizuku was trapped in was indeed her time with Cheerful Days. The colours invert as Shizuku pushes into the foreground and, as if helped by the repetition of that lyric, colours return to her and that Cheerful Days background fades to black. The glass shatters, and we're now on a stage with the jewel seen in the background, representing Shizuku escaping her prison and being herself with more jump. But purple is still the predominant colour of the setting, which shows Shizuku choosing not to forget and instead admiring Cheerful Days and Arisa. That shadowy silhouette section is replaced with another scene if, currently only on the JP server until More Jump World Link 2 arrives, you have a Mastery 2 World Link 2 Shizuku card in your team. I know it's not out on EN yet, but when else am I going to have such a perfect moment to mention it? Anyway, if you have the card in your team, this scene will play instead, where Shizuku looks at, again, a shadow figure in a purple room. The colours and the silhouette of Cheerful Days Shizuku let us know exactly what she's going through here. But what we see is Shizuku nodding and smiling at her old self, moving forward towards it. She then enters a blue room with the More Jump Clover at the centre. This shows a similar theme, but stressing that she had to move towards her Cheerful Day self to move forward as Hinomori Shizuku, accepting and embracing both her new and old selves, just like she does in this event story. Either version of the scene transitions to this purple stage. And before we go on, I do want to draw attention to the choreography. Like how in the Cheerful Days snow globe, the dancing is all very individualized and separate, mostly focusing on one character at a time. Even when Minori and Airi walk forward in unison, they're actually doing different dance moves. The only time they're doing things actually in unison are when they're all kinda separated out and the dance moves have crying themes to them. This symbolizes the pre-Momoi jump times when Shizuku was still in Cheerful Days, and each member was still suffering from their own pains in the main story. There's this Len part where he leads them all together, first dancing a separated unison, facing outwards. Then they all gather together. First just Len and Shizuku, then Haruka, Airi, and Minori join in. With Len's part, the time signature changes to 8-8, which is similar to the regular 4-4 but with stronger accents on the compound beats. Then it goes to 3-4 time, like a waltz. If we really overanalyze this part, then the changing time signature of the music shows a break in the endless, mundane, monotonous lives of suffering they were leading during the early parts of the main story, and symbolizes the forming of MMJ. This is followed by Haruka and Airi singing separated from each other and the rest, and this has two interpretations. One is just Airi and Haruka operating separately, away from each other and the rest before MMJ is formed, and if you remember from the Momoi Jump main story, they hardly knew each other. The other interpretation is showing them, from afar, praying for and supporting Shizuku back in those times. We see Haruka showing support for Cheerful Days Shizuku in a flashback in her side story, and of course, Airi admits several times that the #1 Shizuku fan isn't me, nor is it this person, because the #1 Shizuku fan is Airi. Next, Minori and Airi walk forward, crossing paths. Them moving together, though with different dance moves like I said, may represent when Airi joins Minori to become an idol again, and then together, they try and support Shizuku, who has just quit Cheerful Days. Mind, the lyric here is about no longer being protected, so I think it representing Shizuku quitting Cheerful Days also fits quite nicely. As Shizuku points to those she wants to protect in the rest of MMJ, the idol group is ready to metamorph like a butterfly, or otherwise grow and evolve. The lights go off, and we see these swaying motions like a tree or a plant in the wind, before we break out of the Cheerful Days snow globe and enter onto the stage, with their arms lowering and raising, with the synth pitch sliding down and up, like planting a seed and it blooming into a beautiful flower. I honestly didn't think I was going to have much to say about the dance, other than thinking this bit from Airi is really cute, and that the dance kinda seems plant-based. I interpret a lot of it as kind of blooming or opening and closing of flowers, and branches, stems, and fauna swaying with the wind. So yes, I would say it is that deep, and all of the flowers that were placed into the card arts were placed there for a reason. I just hope I got those flowers right. Speaking of swaying or floating with the wind, at the beginning of this section, petals start floating across the screen. At first, they are brown-orange, representing Minori. Then the camera closes up on Haruka and they start showing dark blue. Then, in a rather obvious way, during Airi's close-up, pinkish-red petals start to float across the screen. Then a Len close-up, followed by yellow-gold petals, and finally, we see the majority of petals as light blue, representing Shizuku. In addition, for the first time, we see the characters from behind the stage rather than the front, showing either we're looking away from the jewel that represents Shizuku's past, moving forward as the real Shizuku of Momoi Jump, or that we are the jewel, looking towards Shizuku of the present. From this, there are two interpretations that come to mind. One is that taking the perspective of old Shizuku from this camera angle shows that she is still together with modern Shizuku, just as she says in the story. The other is, once again, taking the perspective of old Shizuku, looking forward instead at the future. Like all of those lyrics of reassurance are Shizuku talking to her past self, and this final shot is that in a picture, with all those light blue glow sticks visible in the crowd, even while being herself with a new group. The only remaining lyrics in the 3DMV are the profound na 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 na, which are sung in a rising and lowering of pitch, like the heart of Shizuku swaying back and forth, up and down between her two personas, ending on the central root note, signifying her meeting herself in the middle and accepting both as part of herself. I was gonna analyze this lyric as a joke, but this is actually kinda legit. Bravo, Vince! So that's the end of the 3DMV. Let's rewind a minute because there are some lyrics from earlier I want to go over together with the rest of the song, and some more lines in the full version of the song. The Len line, "Those tears are yours and yours alone." This is Shizuku speaking to herself. and I often find virtual singers are stand-ins for the primary character's own mind. It's like telling herself that the pain of letting others down is her pain to bear, thus why she doesn't want to let anyone, even Momoi Jump, worry about her. This sounds sad and isolating, which it likely was with Cheerful Days. At her worst times, no one in the idol group had her back. No one was there to comfort her. Even the person she hoped she would be able to rely on. Truly, her tears were hers, and hers alone. But the song goes on to a chorus of assertions. Even if I get hurt by those words of yours, I am who I am, so I'll never be lost. I'm sure I'll never be protected again. However, I've got everything I want to protect, so I'm not worried. It's like a response to the listener worrying about those tears of hers, as she reassures the listener that she's going to be fine. But like in the story, she prioritizes making others feel at ease with these kind of assertions, like in chapter 1 and 2 when MMJ worries about Shizuku learning that their MCs have been changed to Cheerful Days, or when they're going to meet with Cheerful Days at the studio. As for the specifics of these lyrics, even if I get hurt by these words of yours, these are a clear as a water drop reference to Arisa and Cheerful Days, especially given the purple background. But alternatively, they could refer to the hurtful words from Airi, since a lot of this choreography and lyrics seem to be referring to the early main story Momoi Jump. That fits too. I am who I am, so I'll never be lost, is her accepting her current self, the real self that Arisa tries to expose during the I Has segment, thus nullifying Arisa's attempt to besmirch her reputation. Then, I'm sure I'll never be protected again, is her persona and its maintenance from Cheerful Days no longer protecting the real Shizuku from judgment and harm, followed by, however, I've got everything I want to protect, so I'm not worried, which is just beautiful. As mentioned, she says this while pointing to each member of Momoi Jump in the 3DMV, and it shows Shizuku's belief in herself. Her real self has grown strong enough to the point that she doesn't gain comfort in being protected, but by having those that she wants to protect, and she spends a lot of this event story doing this in numerous small ways. Now, though she believes in all of these assertions she's making, she needs that extra self-assurance, that little extra work to make herself sure of it, which, in and of itself, is very Shizuku-like. Thus, the repeated lines right after, "There's nothing I'm scared of, I'll never feel afraid. There's nothing I'm scared of, I'll never feel afraid." This adds extra meaning to the silhouette presentation of these lyrics, with her fears, this darkness surrounding her, but she breaks out of it with a fierce final statement that she'll never feel afraid. This whole segment is basically the whole of episode 6 and 7. Shizuku's so humble afterwards, but Arisa was no match for her endless authenticity. And that's actually it for the lyrics, at least those presented in the game version with the 3DMV. A 2DMV would be amazing one day, but since Peachy Key got one first, I assume this song won't get one, at least not for a while. In the full version, we get one more verse with mostly different lyrics, though the rest is repetition. The proof of existence that everybody wants, being special, or individuality, I have no need of such things. This is sung by Minori, and fair enough, this also applies to her, but applies stronger to Shizuku. Cheerful Days, and particularly Arisa, express great envy of Shizuku's position as a leader, and Arisa gets particularly mad when Shizuku seems to squander the position and even wish she didn't have it. During that flashback, it's clear Shizuku is saying it out of sheer stress and breaking down after all the pressure and even bullying from her team members. What is being said in these lyrics is said with strong, deliberate conviction. Everyone may want these things that were given to her without her really asking, but she doesn't need them. She may have relinquished her position as leader of an idol group and left it entirely, but being where she is now and feeling how she does not regret a second of it. The next lyric, "I'll just sing out the answers to my anguish," implies that instead of needing that proof of existence, simply singing and being herself is fine enough. It might seem hypocritical with the previous line, but it's not a proof of individuality she's looking for here, instead just plain old self-acceptance. Not needing the approval of others anymore, and truly becoming independent. Though the next line repeats, never showing her tears again, the line after is replaced by, "I wonder if I'll be laughing more tomorrow than I was yesterday." The word walao can also mean to smile, so that's another way to read it. Either way, it's a more positive, glass half full version of the previous verse, looking towards a bright future, supported by the next line changing to, "My heart tells me tomorrow is yours and yours alone." This fits with the story in how, and I love this by the way, Shizuku does not move forward because Momoi Jump nor the virtual singers pushed her forward or helped her up or encouraged her. Instead, she saw, seized and owns the opportunity all by her own power, truly hers and hers alone, graduating to independence. Now, I know, we've spent such a long time on the MV and the lyrics, but I've kept diving back into the script and my notes while leaving the song or the 3D MV on in the background, and I just kept finding new details to overanalyze. This script has gotten just longer and longer and longer, but also this is like my second favourite event in the entire game, more than Mizu 5, so I'm happy to do it. This was not my favourite Shizuku commission song, and on release of the short version, I was actually on the verge of disliking it due to the sheer contrast between the beautiful vocal sections followed by the na 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 na. But not only did it grow on me naturally, especially with the release of the full version, but overanalyzing the 3D MV and the lyrics have given a massive buff to my appreciation of the song. So it's kind of sitting as one of my favourite Shizuku commission songs out of all of them now, though I'm sure similar buffs will happen as I analyse the others in the future. Also, this comment on the last video about Mizu 5 said it should be longer, so if the video length bothers you, blame them, I guess. But now it's time to delve into the main part of the event story. As mentioned earlier, it follows directly off the back of Haruka 3, which ends on a cliffhanger telling us that the iHas TV segment MMJ's in will swap the MCs out with Cheerful Days. So, we've spent more than enough time analysing everything else, so let's jump right into the event story of at the end of the Unravelled Thread. As I mentioned in the summary, the story begins with Shizuku being unaware that their MCs have been swapped out with Cheerful Days. Initially, the story seems to frame this badly, going to an anime flashback, and they comically retroactively added Arisa part as Cheerful Days member C. But very importantly, you can see that Shizuku is smiling. There are two interpretations of this that are both explored in the story. She tells everyone not to worry. Minori and Haruka believe her, but Airi is slightly skeptical. Airi is of the first interpretation, that Shizuku is putting on a brave act to not worry anyone, as she approaches Shizuku after the others leave to ask her how she really feels. Though Shizuku does yield an amount of concern, we get some dialogue very revealing about Shizuku's character.
ここで私がチアフルデイズのみんなのことを気にして今回のテレビ出演を断ったとしても何も変わらないと思うの。何も変わらず私はずっとチアフルデイズのみんなに負い目を持っててみんなも私に微妙な気持ちを持ち続ける。
This is a major characteristic of Shizuku that recurs through basically every story she features prominently in, and is also representative of one of her largest struggles that we're gonna spend a good amount of time on a bit later. But for now, let's focus on this one line. I'll keep having reservations about Cheerful Days, which will force you all to keep worrying about how I feel. Honestly, this is kind of similar to a point from our previous video on Mizu 5, albeit very different context. But notice how Shizuku says her own feelings of having reservations about Cheerful Days will cause Momoi Jump to worry about her. She doesn't want her closest friends in her idol group to worry about her because she'd feel like a nuisance. Wow, what's this page about? I'm going to skip forward to the flashbacks in chapter 4 for a moment, since chronologically they've already happened anyway, and I need to continue this point. Arisa proposes that Cheerful Days, including Shizuku, celebrate their dance practice with barbecue. And Shizuku politely refuses because she wants to practice more, saying that she's not as good at dancing as the rest of them, so she needs to practice more to keep up.
私のことは気にしないでみんなで行ってきて。アリサちゃんのダンスは完璧だったし私の練習に付き合わせるのは申し訳ないもの。
Both Cheerful Days Shizuku and Momoi Jump Shizuku are always feeling responsible, not wanting to hold anyone else back, and trying not to cause problems for anyone else. Naturally, if she did have a problem, Airi and the rest of Momoi Jump would absolutely come running to her aid out of their own free will, but Shizuku wouldn't want that. To put it very simply, these moments, and through most of this event, we'll see Shizuku's selflessness on full display, both in past and present. Towards the end of chapter 2, it skips to them showing up at the iHas studio to talk to the producers about the upcoming program. Minori is absolutely giga nervous, given she's never done this before, and when she expresses that she's trying to calm herself down but just can't figure out how to do it, Shizuku steps in immediately. She hears her out and repeats her thoughts back to her in a concise manner, helping refocus Minori and calm her down immensely.
応援してくれてる人たちに来てもらえてとっても嬉しかったって言いたいなって。それからあとは衣装のことも聞かれるかもって思ったからファンのみんなが作ってくれたものなんですって話をしようかなって。それならみのりちゃんはファンのみんなへ感謝の気持ちを届けたいのね。
As nice as this is and as much as it works, when the producer walks in, Minori dives behind Haruka, which is kind of funny. This is just another example of Shizuku looking out for others, even though the whole Cheerful Days drama should be making her the one to freak out the most. The IAS producer mentions that the broadcast will feature raw and uncut conversations between idols, and so surprise stories are welcome, more or less, implying that there may be some ad-libbing. As it happens, Cheerful Days are in the studio upstairs and would like to quickly meet with Momoi Jump during their own break time, meaning right now. It takes MMJ by surprise, and though Shizuku chose to accept the offer and the IHAS producer affirms this, the reality of the situation sets in, and clearly, Shizuku's heart seems to sink. Despite Shizuku accepting, I need to once again just shout out Project SEKAI's phenomenal voice acting and direction. It's a small point, but listen to Shizuku's voice when responding to the IHAS producer.
そうですね。私も共演者としてご挨拶はしたいと思っていたので、ぜひお願いしたいです。
That slight hesitation and almost breathlessness that really encapsulates the feeling of knowing you have to do something, even if you absolutely fear it and do not, in the moment, want to go through with it. She says this while smiling outwardly and turning to Momoi Jump to ask if they're all okay with it, which implies to them that she's fine going through with it, as again, she doesn't want to cause them worry, even if she knows they will.
みんなもいいかしら。わかったわ。
You can still hear that slightest tremble in her voice and the higher than usual pitch she's speaking at that we all tend to do when we're nervous, anxious, or afraid. This subtle communication of, I'm okay with this, I'm freaked out too, and I know you're concerned for me, but trust me, I want this, is not lost on the others. You can see Minori being initially confused but understanding after a second, and Airi and Haruka absolutely pick up what she's putting down. But to shout out the voice direction again, notice how Shizuku's voice lowers back down and stops shaking once the rest of MMJ give their okays.
はい、よろしくお願いします。
Now, not only is this showing Shizuku's strength with Momoi Jump supporting her, thus the self-correction in the song title, I am, we are, but also shows Shizuku's nerves are less about meeting Cheerful Days herself and more about causing worry to Momoi Jump. My god, how caring can one character be? In contrast, the moment she sees Arisa, she seems deeply troubled again. Upon actually meeting, Arisa shows off her NPC Live 2D capabilities with a smug grin at Shizuku. She's able to hold it together, but Shizuku's shaky voice comes back.
そうね。みんな久しぶり。元気そうでよかったわ。
Arisa and Cheerful Days make their intentions known pretty much immediately by saying she seems to be having way more fun than when she was with Cheerful Days. This could potentially be not a shot at her, and Shizuku just feels that way due to her reservations about Cheerful Days, not actually being because she doesn't like them, because she was bullied while she was a member, but because of the severe sense of guilt she feels for upsetting them instead. Oh, hey, this thing's back. Arisa makes it out like it's all water under the bridge, but says some fun stuff.
だから、雫と、モーモージャンプの皆さんとやるコーナーも、短いからって適当にはやりたくないから、全力でやろうと思ってるので、よろしくお願いしますね。
Something truly telling about Shizuku's character happens here, that will happen later as well. But first, Arisa. If you aren't picking up on what Arisa is saying here, she's using a fun literary technique we in the business call being a bitch! This sort of doublespeak will come up later, but Arisa is really saying, this Momoi Jump segment is going to be really short, but this is a unique opportunity to get back at you and drag your name through the mud. So I'm going to go all out on this during the broadcast, and I know you probably hate us too, so I hope you'll bring a good fight and make good drama for the audience. This is a bold declaration of war. But what she ironically doesn't realize is she's dealing with Hinomori Shizuku. Her voice stops shaking as her true authenticity can come back in. Immediately, she's apologizing for how they might not be the best, most experienced group for appearing on TV, but they plan to give it all they have, despite that.
こちらこそよろしくね。モーモージャンプとしてテレビに出るのは今回が初めてだから迷惑をかけるかもしれないけれど、私たちも精一杯やらせてもらおうと思うわ。収録でお話できるのを楽しみにしているわね。
The difference between them is that Shizuku is not double speaking at all, and truly means everything she says. She'll give it her very best for the sake of the TV program, and for Cheerful Days' sake as well, looking forward to her own opportunity to have a conversation with Arisa. Once that's done, she formally thanks them and says she'll see them in the shoot, like requesting Shizuku to a 1v1 was all she wanted to do. She'd have had a better chance at challenging her in COD though. Everyone sees Arisa as telling the truth, and though she kinda is, they prepare for an honest, open conversation rather than what Cheerful Days had in mind. For 2 episodes, we have those flashback scenes of Cheerful Days when Shizuku becomes and is the leader. We've covered episode 4 a bit already, but in episode 5 is when Shizuku is the leader and all the bullying starts. The climax of this is a major part of Shizuku's character arc, which ultimately led her to quit the group, and sets the tone for the rest of her interactions with Cheerful Days, and somewhat with everyone else as well. But before that, we get a quick scene with Shizuku at a shoot location, and the producer says they can see why Shizuku is so well admired. Shizuku's internal monologue questions this, then apologizes for being so busy as she's trying not to refuse others, then on reflecting on her schedule being so busy, attributes it to the producer, implying it's the work of the producer and Cheerful Days making her perfect persona that's gotten people to like her. Okay, let's talk about imposter syndrome! Shizuku is imposter syndrome, to the point where I was saving this for a character analysis rather than an event story analysis, but it's such a major part of her story here, particularly in the flashback, that it's worth talking about a little bit. Heck, it's even a bit on the nose. She literally has imposter syndrome. She's playing a part! So to those who don't know, imposter syndrome is the feeling that, despite being successful, that you didn't earn it, or deserve it, or some external factor is the reason instead, like luck or the work of other people, or anything that wasn't your effort. Shizuku from the main story proclaims to Minori that being an idol is all about heart and effort, lessons that she got from Airi. These lessons inspired her to go forward with being an idol since she felt lost and directionless without that. She just happened to get an application form sent in by a friend, which happened to get her an audition, which she happened to win the Grand Prix with, and thus get accepted into Cheerful Days. Like, a potential cause of imposter syndrome is being different from your peers or when noticing others in the workplace are all different from yourself. She won the Grand Prix and has no experience in dancing, singing, or being an idol, but runner-up Arisa and the rest of the Cheerful Days members all seem to have those things. She literally says, "Everyone here has so much more experience singing and dancing than I do. I don't want to be a burden on the others." Some other signs are constant self-doubt despite success, deflecting praise, and attributing success to luck or other factors than personal ability. This happens in that scene from this event we just mentioned, but also another sign is overworking. You know how she refused Arisa's offer to celebrate in lieu of working harder? And how she does that with Momoi Jump, like in the Color of Myself event story? And how she takes on way too much while in Cheerful Days to the point of choice paralysis? And even becoming a self-sacrificing martyrdom, taking on way too much work, and trying to focus on everyone else's feelings before her own? Shizuku is the imposter. Eject her already! Taking on everything as a leader and deflecting praise, not allowing breaks for herself, and working way too hard lead to frustration and burnout. The mass amount of indecision and choice paralysis in the climactic scene of the flashback in chapter 5 show the downward spiraling of Shizuku's mental state and self-esteem, leading her burnout to manifest as running away. To make matters worse, her boiling point of calling herself out on her own incompetence, from her own perspective, not mine, I could never, strikes a nerve of Arisa, who mocks her on not appreciating the position she was given as the lead. Shizuku, who to both her own perspective and the perspective of the jealous Cheerful Days members who were made to play along with the producer's perfect persona idea, see her as someone who basically won by doing nothing. While for Arisa and Cheerful Days, and one other individual we'll talk about in a minute, this manifests as rage. This sheer dichotomy and cognitive dissonance this causes within Shizuku only pushes her further into her breaking point. She was told by the idol she admires the most that the most important thing for her in idol is heart, effort, and actively giving hope to others through action and feeling. Not these things that Cheerful Days and even Shizuku was attributing her success towards, like being a pretty face. And you know the best part? You know what Shizuku's reaction is to this? You know what she wants to hit back at Arisa and Cheerful Days with after all of this? She wants to apologize and make it up to them. Please, I can't. If you can't already tell, I, like chances are most people watching, have a pretty long experience with imposter syndrome. And it didn't even start with this channel. Not this one. This one. Even before that, I never thought much of my own ability, worked harder than necessary at many endeavors in my life due to thinking I don't measure up to my peers at all, and couldn't see why anyone would watch any of these videos. Heck, why are you watching this? I mean, while you are, you could hit the like button and subscribe. But probably the part of that in particular that hits is if I have a moment where I feel my videos, live streams, or other things are going badly, I also feel a need to apologize and make up for it immediately. Even if I were to be attacked by a negative comment, I couldn't help but think, damn, they've got a point, and I clearly need to make up for whatever bad I've done. Like Shizuku, I think this mindset comes from a noble, actually positive place. Taking constructive criticism in your stride and improving from it is a massive point in getting better at stuff, rather than taking the more egocentric route and deflecting criticism entirely. One of these seems cool and humble, and the other very arrogant, but both are potentially damaging to you, especially at the extremes. Heck, the funniest part of this is probably that although I felt Shizuku shows pretty relatable signs of imposter syndrome throughout the story, I've doubted my take on that so much that I've been pretty hesitant when mentioning it before, and had to go look up imposter syndrome articles online to make sure I had it right in the first place. I had imposter syndrome about imposter syndrome! Anyway, there's someone else who got really annoyed and jealous of Shizuku in virtually the same way Arisa did, and that, more or less immediately after Arisa's outburst, was Airi. The last bastion in Shizuku's self-confidence was her advice from Airi, in that the most important thing about being an idol were their actions, their heart, their efforts, and so that's what she felt proud of, instead of being praised for her looks or other things she had little control over. Some part of her still felt like being an idol meant these things, and that if nothing else and no one else, the person who could still see her for the effort she brought was Momoi Airi. But as we know from the main story, while Shizuku gives Airi heartfelt praise while hoping she would still see herself as a good idol, Airi lashes out and hits exactly where it hurts in an already open wound. This would be flipped when Airi confronts Arisa, who wasn't yet a named character, but still appears in the Journey to Bloom animation, and Airi gives her own heartfelt praise of Shizuku, which brings her back in, making her the happiest she's felt since being an idol. And again, just note, the last thing Shizuku does with Cheerful Days, at least until this current event story, is apologize for being a disappointing leader and thanking them. Arisa, unlike Airi, never praises Shizuku's good points, and, at least for now, hasn't seen them or has taken a blind eye to them in pure spite and jealousy. This is a 22-page script and my voice is dying. I will be back. A lot of what I've just said has to do with Shizuku's character as a whole, and I might end up expanding on it in a future character analysis. But it's a good fragment of why Shizuku is and always will be my favourite character overall, but the best is yet to come. But before that, I think there's a very important character we're skipping over here. Arisa. Who is Arisa? What is she doing here? What are her motivations? And why do I keep pronouncing her name wrong? It should really be pronounced like Arisa or Alisa, as you can hear in-game.
Arisa-chan, Arisa-chan, Arisa-chan?
My excuse is that I've played a bit too much Tekken.
Alisa Boskonovich.
In the flashbacks, she seemingly gets on very well with Shizuku and the other members of Cheerful Days. According to Shizuku, Arisa would make a great leader. Some people have said it's clear she's jealous from the beginning, but I don't think that's exactly the case at all. Arisa is actually incredibly similar to another character in Shizuku's life, Airi. Both get on with Shizuku, both have been jealous of her, and both get frustrated at Shizuku's indecisiveness. The difference is, Arisa has had to work under Shizuku, take part in maintaining that fake image Cheerful Days producers wanted to maintain for her, and generally worked much closer with Shizuku. I'm a Shizuku fan, 100%. And I'd be frustrated working with Shizuku in these conditions, though I don't think that's a particularly hot take. Arisa and Airi are so similar. If you swapped them around and had Arisa in Cutie and Airi in Cheerful Days, I imagine things would pan out quite similarly with just these characters on opposite ends. Watching someone fumble, take for granted, or otherwise misuse something you want desperately is definitely up there on things to get really mad about. But Arisa is partially responsible for all of this. Shizuku already expressed that being inauthentic was concerning to her, and I get Arisa was probably just trying to cheer Shizuku up in that moment, she and the rest of Cheerful Days said they would catch her if she falls. I don't think any of them really understood where this would take them. Shizuku already had a work ethic to keep up with them all, but having this crutch meant she could rely on them, and a bit too much. That would damage her own ability to keep up in practice. As a what-if scenario, if she couldn't rely on them to catch her, not only would she feel more free and comfortable being herself once exposed as a goofball, as we would see in More Jump, but she wouldn't be taking as many offers as she had been doing, not just because the public wouldn't see her as perfect anymore, but because her strong sense of responsibility would have her making more time for practice, just as she had been doing until that point. Cheerful Days Shizuku is a problem of their own making. Shizuku's inaction may have helped it, but Arisa and the rest grew this problem together. As mentioned, Arisa is so similar to Airi that they even both crack and have outbursts towards Shizuku at basically the same time in the game's timeline, maybe even just days apart. Airi knows she doesn't really mean it and knows where Shizuku's effort is going and how much of it there is, which is why she talks about that exactly in episode 11 of the main story. But Arisa fully knows and means what she says. Now, don't get me wrong, pretty much every antagonist in Project Sekai is three-dimensional, even, and actually especially, Mafumon. But Arisa is very much so a character with depth, and I'm excited to hear more about her in future stories. There are so many mentions and references to Arisa in future Shizuku cards and card arts that her place in Shizuku's mind is one of massive admiration, probably tied with Haruka and Minori, and with them, second only to Airi. But those are future events that you can be sure a channel with this name will get to in time, so let's bring it back to Shizuku3 and the climax of the event story. In Chapter 6, The Great Idol War, wonderful name by the way, the TV segment is set to begin. Though the others are focused on the TV segment, Shizuku is nothing but admiration for Arisa, noting how she's improved as an MC and as a leader. This reaffirms to Shizuku that she should never have been a leader in the first place, and it should always have been Arisa. But this is said in a completely different tone to the way she mentioned it in the flashbacks. Though she had no ability to speak for herself the way Arisa did, which, by the way, she demonstrates that she absolutely can do during this segment, she also affirms that she's not playing Perfect Shizuku anymore. And though she didn't know what Arisa really meant back then about capitalizing on playing the lead, now she does. Also, I've said Perfect Shizuku so many times, it sounds like her final form in Dragon Ball or something. Shizuku is also not nervous whatsoever. She shows nothing but pure determination and focus on her goal, which is, as always, to spread hope to everyone, including Arisa. Arisa maneuvers the conversation quickly by having them drop formal language, and then talks to and introduces the members of Momoi Jump, one by one in an order that purposefully ends with Shizuku. All this informality sets up Arisa's co-member, Marina, to ask if Arisa and Momoi Jump know each other, and also sets up Arisa's ability to go all out. As Arisa goes off script, Airi and Haruka try to make some quips to bring them back down to earth subtly without the audience realizing, and they all realize exactly what Arisa meant by giving it her all. This crazy keep the audience happy while verbally battling my opposition doublespeak that both groups have going on is basically going to come from everyone in this story except Minori and the best character. In episode 7, Airi and Haruka have smiles for the camera, but Minori doesn't have the experience to hide her anxiety with all the bad blood in the air. Though Cheerful Days goes back on script, she asks about where Momoi Jump's costumes came from and who designed them, which naturally leads them to answer Shizuku. Shizuku mentions that she, in Shizuku fashion, accidentally opened up a map on her phone while struggling to look up flower symbolisms. Struggling to look up flower symbolisms, huh? But here's the thing. Momoi Jump are actively putting attention onto Shizuku here, who is responsible for the costume designs. They are proudly presenting their beloved Shizuku in full goofball mode, what with the mentions of her phone troubles, showing the real and authentic Shizuku from the get-go, with her having no need at all to seem perfect. Arisa, naturally, snaps onto this. She moves towards their connection with their fans with how closely they seem to work with them as independent idols, and then brings down the question of whether Shizuku's fans were disillusioned now that she seems so different compared to how she was with Cheerful Days. Essentially calling Shizuku fake in front of the TV cameras, Minori is shocked. But, and I want you to pay attention here, Shizuku freaking smiles! Airi snaps back at Arisa. Haruka is perturbed but holds her composure. Even these two highly experienced idols are close to losing it with Arisa's attacks. But Shizuku, the one everyone was worried about ahead of the IHAS broadcast, is smiling. As if to punctuate just how off the rails Arisa is going with this, Marina from Cheerful Days is also worried, asking if Arisa's taking this too far. As Arisa digs in further, Shizuku begins saying she did have fun in Cheerful Days as well. And here Arisa drops the perfect, smug voice line. As always, huge props to the Sekai voice actors. And she mentions how Shizuku had to play the perfect Shizuku at all times in Cheerful Days, but now acts all dopey and as if she can't use her phone well. Even though she worked closely with Shizuku before, she still makes it sound like to the audience that Shizuku hasn't become real, but has instead switched character, if that makes sense. She then drops the bombshell question. Which finally has enough power to break Shizuku's composure slightly, as the other members of Cheerful Days dig in, pressuring her to answer the question. Haruka and Airi worry for how Shizuku will take it, and the cameras remain rolling, lenses trained on her like vultures. But then, Shizuku finally gets the exact moment she had been wanting the entire time.
私は Cheerful Days のメンバーとして活動していたとき、いつもの私とは違う私を演じていたの。
She straight up admits to playing a fake character in Cheerful Days. This is when you might think, Shizuku can finally expose Cheerful Days for making her play this unrealistic character, and the other members for being so harsh to her for it. But that's not what she does. At all. Her beginning to admit this even has Arisa's interest, like she's been wanting to hear what Shizuku was really thinking back then. Even though she hates Shizuku, and probably thinks Shizuku hates Cheerful Days, it's like she really wants to know for sure, and perhaps even hoping that Shizuku will expose her. More on that in a minute. That's when Shizuku goes on to take all of the blame. She has the perfect scapegoat with the truth of what Cheerful Days put her through, and she refuses to use it. Then, Shizuku apologizes for disappointing her fans and having no right to be the lead. Cheerful Days members joke about with it, but it's clear they're taking the opportunity to take more digs at Shizuku live on TV, especially from Marina's reaction. And yet, Shizuku is all smiles. As she continues smiling, she drops the most important line in this entire event for Shizuku's character. You know how she was just saving Cheerful Days' reputation by taking the blame and lying that she wanted to be perfect and play that part? Well, what if she wasn't lying? Everything she just said, she completely meant. She really did have low confidence in herself. She really did admire those who could accomplish anything flawlessly. She really did want to be perfect, and she really thought acting the part would work. Most importantly, she really was sorry for what she did, and once again meant that she had no right in being the leader. But this time, she knows what she means by it. With all of this being true, she drops the most important line.
それに、私気づいたの。チアフルデイズの自分も、今の自分も、同じ私なんだって。
The line is so powerful, it breaks Arisa's aggressive composure completely. She's saying she couldn't play perfect Shizuku without the backup of Cheerful Days, and realised she couldn't keep that up with Momoi Jump. That sounds like a lie, again, but she was really considering it if you go back to the Colour of Myself story. She admits that she didn't believe her audience would accept her for who she really was, but still, she chose to be just that. She came to appreciate things only her genuine self could offer that perfect Shizuku never could, and her fans were more than willing to accept her in the end. Through all of this, she became comfortable just being Hinomori Shizuku. But she drops the second bombshell.
私がアイドルとしてファンのみんなに届けたいものは前も今も変わっていないって。だってあの頃も今の私と同じようにファンのみんなに希望を届けたいって気持ちで活動していたから。
The second hit digs deeper at Arisa. The meaning that the old Shizuku and the new Shizuku are one and the same is that the most important part of being an idol, the active job of spreading hope, having heart, and giving it your all, just like Airi taught her, has remained the exact same throughout her career. Her goals, efforts, and feelings have never changed. Old Shizuku wanted to be perfect as a means to an end, the end goal of spreading hope. Shizuku finally got the opportunity to say it to her fans and to Cheerful Days, that even though she may have been playing a part, she always wanted the best for everyone. Now she can play the part of someone who gives it their all, offers forth their heart, and spreads hope to the world perfectly. Shizuku caps this off by thanking Arisa and Ihaz for this wonderful opportunity, with another genuine burst of gratitude, and of course, thanks the audience. With this third hit, Arisa takes critical damage and is entirely disarmed.
よかったらこれからも応援よろしくお願いします。別に私は。
Through all of her scheming and veiled plans to drag Shizuku down, Shizuku saw only the good in her, wished the best for her and Cheerful Days, and thanked her with unparalleled authenticity. Against something like that, she can only reflect inwards with regret that she could do this to a true idol like Shizuku. This is interrupted by Marina, bringing her back down to earth where the cameras are still rolling. And she brings back her cheery personality, promising to stay on script, as if signalling to Momoi Jump and Shizuku, alright, you win the 1v1, my bad. And of course, Shizuku's biggest fan, just like us reading this event story for the first time, could not be prouder.
どうなることかと思ったけど乗り切れたわね。きっと雫自身もこんなことになるなんて想像もしてなかったと思うけど、あんたは あんたがかつて事務所から与えられた理想なんかよりずっとかっこよくて最高のアイドルだわ。
Episode 8 is after the cameras are off, and has a funny comedic moment that actually takes this characterization even further. As Minori and the others compliment Shizuku on keeping her cool so well under all that pressure, Shizuku finally admits to how nervous she was.
そう言ってもらえてよかったわ。私もなんとか答えられたけれど、とっても緊張したから。
For the most part, this is just Shizuku being an adorable goofball, getting all of her thoughts out so quickly. But when they comment on how much Shizuku was able to hide her nerves and keep her cool, Shizuku didn't even realize it. All of that professionalism, the expressions, the words she spoke, all naturally came from the heart, expressed honestly with deliberate purpose and intention. That's just how authentic Hinomori Shizuku is. We hear an
お疲れ様
from the rival, Arisa, now with the cameras off. Airi demands an apology, yet Arisa doesn't see the need. Her goal was to make the show as entertaining as possible, and she kinda hides her actions under just doing her job. Yet, she admits that she'd been looking forward to tormenting Shizuku.
あなた
Now, I'm almost certain whatever Haruka was about to say or do would have been absolute cinema. But Shizuku is the one to stop her, the one who knows Arisa best, and still, even with this, is wishing Arisa well, is so earnest with her feelings that even Arisa is weirded out, no matter how in control she tries to appear to be. Rather than letting Haruka 1v1 Arisa IRL, Shizuku takes the opportunity, now they're one-to-one with no audience, to apologise directly to Arisa. She apologises for how she acted in Cheerful Days, and for squandering her position as the leader in front of her. She realises just how that would have been perceived by her, and she can finally move on from the guilt she's harboured from saying that back then, all this time. There's another important phrase here that's in line with what Shizuku said earlier. My fans, those who prefer the old me, the current me, or just me as I am, they mean the world to me. This creates a further separation from old Cheerful Days Shizuku, current Momoi Jump or Colour of Myself Shizuku, and me as I am, referring to Shizuku who is both at once, showing how she has evolved throughout this entire arc and giving further meaning to the feelings of rebirth from the flowers in the trained card arts. During her speech, Arisa hits back with some seemingly harsh words, yet Shizuku brushes it off like it were nothing but pleasantries. She respects Arisa so highly, she takes her criticism constructively and starts telling her how she's evolved as a person during her time in Momoi Jump, like catching up with an old friend and telling them that you're doing much better now. As she makes to apologise one more time, Arisa can't stand to hear another one, and cuts her off, as if it would wound her pride to hear it again, like how it entirely disarmed her during the IHAS show. One smirky comment from Arisa stands out a bit. You seem to have friends who understand you much better. Implying that Cheerful Days didn't understand at all, and it's almost like an admission of guilt. Arisa probably wishes she saw Shizuku for who she was, and those steadfast goals she had during her time together in Cheerful Days, given how guilty she felt when confronted with it in the show. Though brash, she says she looks forward to how MMJ will continue even without an agency, and finally, wishes them good luck. And as the meme format takes over, once again, Airi and Haruka see the worst in Arisa here. Shizuku continues seeing the best in her, appreciating the rare wish of good luck from Arisa, overjoyed at being recognised as a true idol by someone she admires. Afterward, the TV segment is a resounding success, with many people talking about and becoming fans of Shizuku. This event brings closure to Shizuku's identity crisis, and she has nothing to be afraid of anymore, nothing to feel ashamed of anymore, and only a true self that she can take pride in. What an event! This is one of two event stories I can name where the character has to directly confront their limits and character flaws in order to blast past them, and it's no coincidence that they're my top 2 event stories in the entire game. From the beginning of Shizuku's character arc, she wanted to become perfect, and we know from this event story that she did so earnestly in order to reach her audience the best way she knew how. How could she know any better as an inexperienced idol being pushed forward by her producer and group? As this act suffocated her and caused her to spiral and burn out with almost literal imposter syndrome, she found solace in Momoi Jump, where she didn't have to act anymore. But though her wishes, wills, and heart never swayed, it was only when she fully accepted herself, the old Shizuku, the new Shizuku, and the combined, authentic Hinomori Shizuku of Momoi Jump, with nothing to hide and nothing to fake, did she become perfect. Thank you for watching. This is my second favourite event story in Project Sekai overall, and my appreciation for it increased exponentially after overanalyzing, and actually, I started looking at the card arts as a fun exercise, because I wondered if other events held as much symbolism and significance as the previous overanalysis subject of Mizu 5 did. And though I just randomly picked a favourite event, boy, were there things to overanalyze. If there's anything you think that I missed, or you'd just like to add, or anything else, please do leave a comment down below, as this channel is always open to Project Sekai story discussion. Though I don't plan to solely focus on Shizuku event stories, two stories that I think I may potentially like more than this one are upcoming Shizuku event focuses that I haven't read yet, but I've already looked at the card arts for one of them, and that's going to be pretty fun. For now, I'll say thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you there.